For 10 years, Piper had been the epicenter of Alex's universe, a gravitational force that anchored his every emotion. Their love had been electric, a pulse of passion woven into every kiss, every whisper shared in the hushed glow of midnight. Even after a decade, he still remembered the way she'd unravel beneath his touch, the way her breath would hitch just before surrendering to pleasure. They had built something indestructible, or so he had believed. Lately, though, an unfamiliar chill had seeped into their marriage, a quiet but persistent distance stretching between them. The way Piper kissed him had changed, less urgency, less fire. The intimacy that once felt like a secret language between them now felt rehearsed. Mechanical. She was distracted, lost in thoughts she wouldn't share, her laughter feeling more like a shadow of something real. Alex had told himself that it was just a phase, a lull in the natural rhythm of long-term love. He had even made excuses for her, a demanding workload, stress, exhaustion, but deep down, in the marrow of his bones, he knew something was wrong. The woman who once looked at him like he was her entire world had begun looking elsewhere. It had been an unplanned detour, a whim that led Alex to the quiet street corner where his world unraveled in slow motion. The air was thick with the aroma of roasted coffee and fresh bread as he strolled past a cafe he had never visited before. The sun spilled golden light over the city, making everything feel deceptively warm, deceptively safe. And then, just as he reached the crosswalk, he saw her, Piper, stepping out of the cafe with someone else. For a moment, his heart betrayed him, lifting at the sight of her, his wife, his love, but then his gaze locked onto the man beside her. James. Alex recognized him instantly, one of her colleagues, someone she had mentioned in passing, a footnote in casual conversation. And yet, here he was, standing too close, speaking in hushed tones that suggested intimacy. Then, it happened. James's hand slid around Piper's waist, a touch too familiar, too proprietary. She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned into him, her lips parting in a way Alex knew too well. And then they kissed. The world around Alex blurred, the city noise fading into a distant hum, his breath caught in his throat, his fingers curling into fists at his sides. The kiss was unhurried, unguarded, like a ritual they had performed many times before. It was not the kind of kiss stolen in a moment of reckless impulse. It was practiced, familiar, and with that, Alex knew, this wasn't new. It had been happening. Alex spent the rest of the day in a trance, moving through the motions of normalcy while his mind played a relentless loop of the scene he had witnessed. Piper, in James's arms, their lips meeting like it was the most natural thing in the world. Every glance at his phone, every unread message from her, felt like a cruel joke. How could she text him like nothing had changed? How could she still call him baby when she had another man's hands on her body just hours ago? By the time he parked outside their home, the weight of what he had seen was suffocating. He couldn't go inside, couldn't sit across from her at the dinner table, pretending ignorance while she smiled at him with those same lips that had betrayed him. Instead, he pulled out his phone and composed a text, keeping his fingers steady despite the storm raging inside him. Me. Hey, babe, might stay at Eric's tonight. He's been dealing with some stuff, and I think he could use the company. A lie, but no more than the ones Piper had been feeding him. Her response was immediate. Piper. Aw, that's sweet of you. Hope he's okay. See you tomorrow. Love you. Love you. Alex let out a bitter laugh, the taste of it acrid in his mouth. Love? Was this what love looked like? He shut off his phone, leaned back in the driver's seat, and stared at the ceiling. He had lost her, and she didn't even know he knew. The next morning, Alex waited until he was sure Piper had left for work before stepping into the house. It felt different, hollow, unfamiliar, like the warmth that once made it a home had evaporated overnight. He walked through the living room, his eyes grazing over the framed wedding photos on the wall. Smiling faces, loving embraces, a lie so deeply embedded in his reality that it had taken one stolen kiss to shatter it all. He moved mechanically, showering, dressing, pretending for a moment that everything was normal. But when he reached for his coffee mug, his hand trembled, the weight of his discovery pressing down on him. His mind raced through every moment of their relationship. Every time Piper had laughed at his jokes. Every time she had pulled him in close at night, whispering that he was the best thing that had ever happened to her. Was it all a performance? At work, focus was impossible. Conversations blurred together. Numbers and emails meaningless. Piper's deception clung to him like a second skin. Impossible to shake. How long had it been going on? Had she ever really loved him? He clenched his jaw, anger finally seeping through the cracks of his devastation. By lunchtime, a plan had formed. He wouldn't confront her yet, no. That would be too easy for her. Instead, he would gather every piece of the truth first. If she wanted to lie, he would let her, and when the time came, he would watch her world crumble the way she had destroyed his. Number 5. Write more smoothly and creatively. ChatGPT.noi. That night, Alex played his role perfectly. He walked through the front door, kissed Piper on the cheek, and asked about her day as if nothing had changed. She smiled, slipping seamlessly into their usual routine, talking about meetings, deadlines, and the upcoming work trip. Every word that left her lips was a carefully crafted illusion, and Alex let her weave her web of deception. He studied her closely as she moved around the kitchen. The way she avoided his gaze for just a second too long. The way her fingers fidgeted with the hem of her blouse when she mentioned James. She's nervous. It was subtle, but he caught it, small cracks in her otherwise perfect performance. She had no idea that he had already seen the truth, that he had read every message, seen every secret rendezvous spelled out in texts meant only for him and her lover. "Are you excited about the trip?" he asked, taking a sip of his drink, watching her reaction. She nodded, her expression carefully neutral. "It'll be good for networking. A great opportunity." Liar. Alex forced a smile, playing along. "I'll miss you." Piper hesitated for half a second before stepping closer, wrapping her arms around his waist. "I'll miss you too," she whispered, pressing a kiss to his neck. Her lips were warm, soft, familiar, but Alex felt nothing. Not love, not desire, just the bitter, hollow taste of betrayal. And for the first time, he was certain, when this was over, she would never touch him again. Alex lay awake in bed that night, staring at the ceiling while Piper slept soundly beside him, oblivious to the storm raging inside him. Her breath was slow, steady, lips slightly parted, the same way she had always slept beside him. It made his stomach turn. How could she sleep so peacefully knowing what she had done? How could she roll over and wrap herself around him after spending her days tangled up with another man? His body stiffened as she shifted, one hand lazily draping over his chest. Was this muscle memory or guilt? He exhaled slowly, forcing himself to remain still. He couldn't give himself away. Not yet. His mind replayed every message he had read, the stolen kisses he had witnessed, the plans they had made for their little getaway. Did she feel even a shred of guilt? Or had she convinced herself that her lies were justified? The anger simmering beneath his skin was barely contained, but he swallowed it down. He wouldn't confront her now, not yet. If she had the audacity to keep lying to his face, he needed to be smarter. He needed to be patient. Tomorrow, she would leave for her work trip, thinking she was running into the arms of her lover without a second thought about the man she left behind. But what she didn't know, what she could never see coming, was that Alex wouldn't be sitting at home waiting for her return. No, he had his own plans. And Piper was about to learn just how much damage a man scorned could do. Alex sat in the dimly lit hotel bar, a slow swirl of whiskey in his glass, the ice clinking softly against the crystal. The rich amber liquid burned as he took a sip, but the heat was nothing compared to the fire simmering in his chest. Across the lobby, beyond the polished marble floors and the soft hum of conversation, the elevator doors slid open, and there she was. Piper stepped out, her heels clicking against the tile, her hair perfectly styled, lips glossed, and eyes alight with excitement. She didn't see him. Her attention was locked onto James, the man waiting for her just a few feet away. Alex gritted his teeth as James greeted her with an easy confidence, his hand skimming over her lower back before they disappeared into the hallway leading to their room. His room. The room Alex had upgraded for them earlier that day. A cruel smirk played on his lips as he finished his drink, leaving the empty glass on the counter. They thought they were slipping away into their stolen paradise, wrapped in secrecy and passion. They had no idea what was coming. Alex pulled out his phone, scrolling through the carefully saved messages, the damning evidence he had collected. Then, with steady fingers, he typed a message to James's wife. "Enjoy your night, sweetheart. Just thought you should know your husband is spending his evening in Suite 814. He hit send. And with that, the game had begun. Alex leaned against the cool stone railing of the hotel balcony, the city stretching out beneath him, its lights flickering like stars scattered across the skyline. The crisp night air did little to cool the fire raging inside him. His phone vibrated in his pocket, and when he pulled it out, he wasn't surprised to see the screen lit up with a message from Piper. "Alex, please, we need to talk." He let out a slow breath, fingers tightening around the device. He could imagine her now, panic-stricken, eyes red-rimmed from tears, voice shaking with desperation. But no amount of begging would change what she had done. No apology would erase the image of her pressed against James, their bodies tangled in deceit. He typed back, his words measured, controlled. "Talk? Like how you talked to James in that hotel room." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. He could almost hear her breath hitching as she scrambled for the right words. But none would come. There was no excuse, no justification. Behind him, the hotel doors swung open. A sharp voice cut through the night air, James's wife. "I want to see him," she demanded. Alex turned, meeting her furious gaze. "Oh, don't worry," he said, his smirk laced with cold satisfaction. "You'll get your chance." And as they strode back inside, the storm that Piper and James had tried to keep hidden was finally about to break. Alex sat across from Piper in the dimly lit cafe, the weight of everything that had transpired pressing against them like an invisible force. She looked different now, smaller, fragile, like a shadow of the woman he had once loved. Her fingers trembled as she reached for her coffee, but she barely took a sip before setting it down, her gaze flickering up to meet his. "I never meant to hurt you," she whispered, her voice thick with regret. Alex exhaled slowly, his grip tightening around his cup. "But you did." Silence stretched between them, heavy and unrelenting. He had imagined this moment 100 different ways: anger, resentment, maybe even a sliver of hope that some part of her had still belonged to him. But sitting here, watching her struggle to find words that could never undo what had been done, he felt nothing but closure. "I forgive you," he said finally, not for her, but for himself. Tears welled in her eyes as he stood, pushing back his chair. Without another word, he walked away, toward a future that no longer had room for ghosts of the past. Words giving me advice for the audience to apply in today's life. ChatGPT.noi. Betrayal, heartbreak, and loss are painful, but they also serve as powerful lessons. In today's world, where trust can be fragile and temptations are everywhere, it's crucial to prioritize self-worth and boundaries. If you ever find yourself in a situation like Alex's, remember that your value isn't determined by someone else's betrayal. Healing takes time, but walking away from toxicity is the first step toward rediscovering your strength. Focus on rebuilding yourself, emotionally, mentally, and even financially. Surround yourself with people who genuinely care, and never settle for less than the love and respect you deserve. Growth comes after pain,